Hello, I'm Dr. Theo Tsoukalas, and today we're very fortunate to have with us Mr. Diet Stroeh, a national expert on water management issues and founding partner of CSW's Stuber Stroeh Engineering Group, based here in Nevada. Mr. Stroeh has spent 20 years with the Marin Municipal Water District, 6 years of which he spent as the manager of the Marin Municipal Water District. Mr. Stroeh is featured in a big way in a book that was written in 2006 called The Man Who Made It Rain. The book is a record of the extraordinary story and experiences of Marin County during the 1976 and 1977 severe drought that Marin County experienced. This book is a major contribution to the ongoing discussion on global climate change and its impacts, not also globally, but locally. So today we will be speaking primarily about the local component, if you will, of global climate change, and we will be speaking about it with something that happened at a time when the term global warming was not, I don't believe, was even in our minds.
No.
And but nevertheless, here we are, nearly 40 years later. And we are in the middle of a severe drought, multi-year severe drought in the state of California, as well as other extreme weather events throughout the United States and throughout the world. It must have been quite a time of your life to have been in the thick of this 40 years ago, and dealing with it without the conceptual tools, the models, the metrics, and so on that we have today, and also to try to grapple with an irate public and a news media that, for lack of a better term, did not have the knowledge or the patience to understand the issues. So if I could summarize in 2 or 3 sentences the premise of the book, and then jump in and help me out if I miss something, or I'm sure you have quite a few things to add to it. So the story goes something like this. In the mid-1970s, notably 1976 and 1977, Marin County experienced a 2-year-long severe drought due to weather patterns not fully understood at that time, and due to Marin County not being connected to the state water system. The solution to this huge problem fell on the shoulders of the manager of the Marin Municipal Water District, Mr. Stroeh, who, after managing the reactions of an irate public, the politics of water distribution in California, and the news media, he was able to solve the problem and bring water back to Marin. To put this into the context of some metrics, can you tell us how much water, either in acre feet or in gallons, was normally used in Marin at that time, and how much water was left for use during the drought period?
Yeah, so it's...
And thank you, by the way, for coming with us and being with us.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
I've been talking about this for a lot of years, as you could tell, but the actual runoff into the reservoirs in Marin Municipal Water District's watersheds was around 30 billion gallons of water, and the usage was basically about the same. But there was a certain amount of carryover storage in those reservoirs that could be used during shortages, mild shortages. And it's the winter of 75, 76, the runoff was around 12 billion gallons into the reservoirs, which led us to the first part of the rationing program that was established in the summer of 76. My board asked me, they said, what's the chances of this happening again in the winter of 76, 77? And I kind of smiled and said, less than 1%. Never happened with those percentages. Well, it was worse. It was only 4 billion gallons of runoff into the reservoirs in the winter of 76, 77. And we had 12 billion gallons in the reservoirs left over for the summer of 77, which meant no matter what we did, we were going to be out of water by July for 170,000 people in July. You don't think of those type of things, be out of water for people, 170,000 people. You see this all over the world happening, but usually they don't have any water in the first place. But we did have water, and of course the drought hit.
So today, again, in the context of global climate change, the book's contributions are really immense. Global climate change produces severe weather events, such as severe and prolonged storms, severe flooding, droughts, and rising ocean waters. And it's not only the severity part, it's also the frequency. We are noting that the frequency of these events is getting really worse. This book, The Man Who Made It Rain, tells us in a way what to expect if we do not manage to calm climate change and to manage our water resources properly. The impacts either of ill-informed policy or policy inaction at all levels, local, state, national, and international, are and will continue to be very costly and have already started to affect all aspects of our lives, economic, social, political, and even health and public health. This is not science fiction. It is a reality that still needs to be addressed with drastic measures, the scope of which we have not yet seen. We hope that during this conversation with you, Did, that this will be perhaps an alarm call for the public at large and also for decision makers. As you know so well, this is a topic that's been expressed the best through the voice of science and through the voice of research, which entails frequently language that is really foreign to the common public. But nevertheless, the public does need to be part of this larger discussion and larger conversation because they are the ones who will experience the impacts of this. So, let me then ask you, in the process, we're going back now mentally to 1976 and 1977. What, in the midst of it, that you had to deal with all this, what was the thing that really kept you going in terms of your determination to understand the problem and to solve the problem? And
Well, the problem was, as I stated earlier, was pretty straightforward. Running out of water. And what do? Where do you go? How do you do it? And we started looking at all kinds of different alternatives and trying to find water, even to the point of thinking of bringing an iceberg up from Antarctica, which would have taken 6 months. Wouldn't have done any time for that type of thing. We had tankers ready to come out of Washington loaded with water. So I was going all over the place looking for water to supplement what we did have. And of course, at the same time, we put in a very, very serious rationing program, which was an allocation program. developed by us. And you kind of said it earlier that there's nothing written about this stuff. So we were kind of on the cutting edge of where we go with it.
Right.
What do we do? How do we do it? And you have the public sitting there looking at you, waiting and not believing that there's a problem. And I've had a number of people say some very derogatory comments about me because of that. I was making money for the water district and I was cheating and did all kinds of other crazy stuff. But, you know, in the long run, we finally started hammering, coming down to the possible solutions. And as far as we're getting water, which was working with the state of California, and then Jerry Brown, who was that first time he was governor, and his director of water resources, Ron Roby, and everybody in the state knew what our problem was because of the press.
Right.
And how the press had, and they loved this thing because it was obviously very dramatic. And so in a very, very short meeting, actually about a 6-hour meeting in Sacramento, with federal agents, local water agencies, ours, the state, Governor Brown's people. We sat there, we hammered out an agreement to move water around the state or keep the water in the northern part of the state into the Central Valley, which metropolitan LA area wouldn't take. So that was all hammered out, and the water now was in the Delta. But I had to get it out of the Delta, and we already were looking at putting it in ships and loading it up and what have you, doing that. And it was interesting in that meeting because the federal representative said, I can't sign this agreement. I don't have congressional authorization. Oh. Well, the governor stepped in, and he signed it after the governor talked to him. So it was really kind of interesting dynamics that was going on, because all of this was unheard of. You don't run out of water for 170,000 people, okay? So getting the possibility of water in the Delta, then in a subsequent meeting with the agencies around the Bay Area, it was determined that they could move the water, which some of them were taking out of the Delta already, between two agencies by installing some pipe, and then we would have water at the north end of, or east end of Richmond Bridge. So then we had to build a pipeline across, 6.5 miles of pipeline across Richmond Bridge, 2 pump stations. Now this all started somewhere near February. And
so we're talking 1977.
77. So I said to my staff, I want this thing operational by June. 4 of my engineering staff walked out and said, it can't be done. And I had a young fellow engineer who, like me, was rather naive, I guess, said, it can be done, we'll get it done. And we were buying pipe off the shelf. I was buying pipe without any money. I was buying valves without any money. And then that's when the county and our representative stepped in, John Burton, who was our representative in Congress, Cranston's people. It was kind of neat because the president of the Board of Supervisors in Marin County was very good friends with Jimmy Carter, President Carter. Oh. In fact, when Carter came to Marin County, he stayed in his house. So that's how close they were. Wow. And so he got a meeting set up with Carter's people. And I went back, the president of my board went back, the president of the Board of Supervisors went back, and of course John Burton was there and Cranston's people were there. And the first question was asked, well, why are you here? By the Carter's people. And John Burton says, well, Gary Giacomini, who's president of the Board of Supervisors, will explain why we're here. Gary didn't miss a beat. He says, well, Diet Stroeh will explain too. Now here I am, a little fish in a big pond, so to speak, and with all these gunners sitting around who made things happen, right? So I simply said, well, I told them what the problem was, running out of water, so we needed money to build this pipeline, which we were already building, by the way.
Right.
They looked at me and said, well, Marin County's got nothing but money. They could just raise taxes. You don't need our money.
Oh.
And I said, well, it's not just Marin, it's the whole Bay Area, San Francisco, East Bay, so forth and so on. It's all California. Still, it's affected by this. It's an emergency drought problem. And then when I said 24 western states are affected, that woke them up. And they simply said, well, how much money do you think we need? I had no idea. And I said, $650 million. Sounded like a good number to me. And they said, no, we're not going to authorize 650. How can you think we could live with 350 million? And all we needed was 10 million.
Now, this amount was for all 24 states?
Yes.
I see.
Yes, yes. And that's how they could sell it. So this was a Thursday. That afternoon, they asked Burton and Cranston's people, can you carry it, add this to a defense bill, which was a rider, which was going through Congress at the time. That was Thursday. Monday, I got a call from President Carter's people that the president just signed the legislation. $350 million. Now I had the money to be able to build my pipeline, which I was already building, right? It's not my pipeline, it's people's pipeline. So it was kind of an interesting time. Not only interesting, it was a scary time. And it was probably the first time in my whole life I've ever felt fear. Because how do you explain to 170,000 people there's no water? But we did that to the press. We started all these programs, working with all kinds of folks. The first meeting...
And in fact, sorry to interject, you were answering one of my questions here, about how to deal with the press. So naturally, yes.
Yeah, well, and that was... In fact, I was holding press conferences at 11 o'clock every day because they were constantly calling me, wanting to interview, which took time. So this all worked, and I would have a whole array of television cameras sitting there at every station that we have around here, including foreign countries, and one from Sweden one time, one from Australia, Germany. So we were, I think the key to it was being honest, straightforward. Straightforward and honest with them. It was important to do that. The board was very silent on a lot of this stuff only because they kind of shoved me out front, but I had no choice but to work with. Now, working with the public, the first public meeting we had on the rationing program, which by the way was an allocation program, where you were allocated so much water per day per person. And how we controlled that was economics.
And that was the first time the public had ever heard of this concept, right, of water rationing, that they have so much water for everything, including bathing, cooking, washing their cars, their gardens, and so on.
That's it. That's it.
Wow.
And we had, when I laid this program out, there was around 300, 400 people in the room. Very, very angry. Very angry. As I said earlier, a lot of folks didn't believe it. This can't be happening.
So how did you deal?
What?
How did you deal with that anger?
Well, basically, I said something probably rather stupid or simple, but basically said, you could get rid of me, fire me, get rid of the 5 people behind me, which was the whole board of directors. You still got a problem. So how are we going to get through this?
That's the board of directors of the Marin Municipal Water District.
Right. And so they kind of quieted down at that point. So I laid out the whole program, which basically, as you indicated, you could use the water any way you wanted. It was 46 gallons per person per day. And if it was controlled by the fact that if you met your allotment, you paid the basic cost of about $1.50 per 100 cubic feet. If you went over your allotment, it went to $10 per 100 cubic feet. And if you doubled your allotment, it went to $50 a 100 cubic feet. Well, that really controlled it. And people were actually meeting all their requirements. We had less than 5% that went over, 5%. In fact, I had one family that only used 9 gallons per day per person.
Mm-hmm.
The 4 people in the family.
Right. So now, if I may interject again, this apparently, as you describe in your book, led to a number of innovations in terms of water distribution coming out of faucets, coming out of hoses and shower heads and so on. This 46-gallon, 47-gallon daily allocation as part of a rationing system that each one of the 170,000 residents of Marin had now to follow.
Right.
And that certainly must have generated a good deal of innovations in terms of water usage at the home. Hosing water in the garden, taking showers, using the faucet in the kitchen sink, and so on and so forth. Can you tell us something about it? You are making a good reference of all those in the book, by the way.
It was rather interesting, too, because just prior to this, I and another manager was instrumental in getting legislation passed in state for low-flow toilets, shower heads, and what have you. Well, this just blossomed with the brick in the toilet, shower heads, replacing shower heads. It also spawned all kinds of interesting bumper stickers like shower with a friend type of thing like this. But people did very interesting things. They saved water. They 5-gallon bucket in the shower, 5-minute showers, or Navy showers, you might say. They would save their water. The bucket, the water would be used on the garden, irrigation, that type of thing. We also had worked out with Chevron Oil that they could provide us with, or to the public, provide 50-gallon barrels, steel barrels, and people could retain water that way, and use it for other purposes. People were at restaurants, interestingly enough, washing their vegetables. That wash water was used to wash the floors that night.
Oh, wow.
Or mats, or whatever, paper plates. The simplest story that ever came out of this whole thing was the Valhalla restaurant, which was Sally Sanford, the mayor of Sausalito, who owned it then. Well, in the first place, she thought this thing was contrived by me. And she had some very interesting words about what she called me. But anyway, she had her first bill was 10 times what she normally would pay, water bill. And she came in with her attorney and went on about the fact that she can't meet her allotment and all the rest of this stuff. And I said to her, I said, you're going to have to meet your allotment, and if you're going to make this happen, and or we're going to live through this. And she said, well, I don't think I can do it. I'm going to sue you and all that. I'll tell you what, you give me a check for $2,500 and I'll put it in my drawer. And if you meet your allotment, we'll tear it up when this is all over. Well, she couldn't believe I would do that. She did it. And she had an attorney there. Anyway, 6 months later or whatever it was, she came back in, wanted to know about her check. And she had met her allotment.
Wow.
And I said to her, I said, how did you do that? Paper plates. The funniest part of it, she shut the men's restroom because the restaurant was on a wharf. And she said, well, they can go off the end of the wharf.
Oh my goodness.
Which is, the screwiness, stuff like this. But I think in the long run, when everybody got through all of this, they were doing, and there's still are doing this as far as how they're saving water and how they're being misers about how they use it.
Right, right. And I do recall a slogan that surfaced and it became a very fun item to report on among the news media. And it went something like this, correct me here. If it's brown, flush it down.
Yeah.
If it's yellow, let it mellow.
Right on.
So,
yeah, that was very common. In fact, it's back now.
what was, help me again, and for our audience, What was that? That was in reference to using the toilets.
Oh yeah, yeah, and people, they'd shut the water off while they're brushing their teeth. You know, little simple things like that, and people are still doing it.
Yeah.
They're still doing it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of innovative ways of handling stuff. It was really interesting. We taught 170,000 people to become meter readers. So they were reading their meter on a daily basis. And a lot of times in various parts of town or various parts of the district, there was a contest that would go on, and who used the least amount of water that week. And whoever won it got a bottle of wine or something, or whatever it was. But it became a contest. It really became a contest.
And so now, prior to this behavior, right, from the public, we have significant opposition. Lack of knowledge, in part, I understood from the book, was what was fueling this opposition. But once people began to understand the significance of the problem, secondly, that this was a genuine problem, and it was not just another trick by the county bureaucrats to extract more money out of revenue and so on and so forth. Once they understood that, they came on board. Now, this is not something that could have happened, I think, without your efforts, without the significant efforts to be transparent, to be accessible both to the public as well as to the news media. So you were able to make the opponents essentially partners in your larger efforts to solve this problem. And we talked earlier a bit about some of the ways these efforts were expressed, and the public now was getting involved with all kinds of innovations and so on. Can you tell us more about that? Because it did certainly require a good deal of thinking on your part to make the opponents, partners to this larger effort.
Well, one of the things I did, was to divide and conquer, you might say. Various businesses, the car washes, the restaurants, the laundries, blah, and on and on and on, brought them all together as a group. And doing that and going through the fact that they needed to find ways and innovative ways of saving water and innovative ways of reducing usage. And they did, and it was kind of interesting. Usually, it all started out, and Sally Sanford was one of them when she called me a dumb bastard, quite frankly. And that's what I told her. I said, I didn't know my parents weren't married, but and it kind of loosened everybody up. And this was all the restaurant people.
All the restaurants.
And finally, you would get a comment from one of them, or two of them, or five of them, or whatever it is. What can we do to help? And I says, think about going through your own and getting down to how you use water. And like I said, a lot of them were taking their water they do their vegetables with, and then use that to wash the floors at night. So a lot of stuff like that happened. The car washes, they all went to recycling, just like that. They just went to recycling. A lot of the industries that had huge air conditioners and what have you were the blow-down water. They were recycling the blow-down water for their air conditioners. Stuff like that. San Quentin Prison, good example. Now, you wouldn't think the prisoners would care one way or another what went on. And what they were doing for years was turning the showers on in the morning, and they ran all day. So they said that they wrote us a letter through the prisoner exchange, said, what if we shut the showers off? Would that be a good idea? Well, of course it'd be a good idea.
Of course.
And they did it.
Wow.
They found out that...
So even they
yes.
became partners in the larger
They
effort.
became partners in this whole thing. And it was...
Wow.
even the naysayers And when it was all said and done, I think people were sad that the drought was over, so to speak, because they were so happy working with each other and making things happen. So it wasn't so much me, it was just a matter of bringing everybody together and talking with them and working things out and getting them to become part of the solution, become them part of the answer.
Right. So let's talk a little more about the politics of this. You mentioned earlier the effort to find money to build the pipeline that was needed. And certainly I think that covers part of the larger politics of this problem. But the local component, if you will now, the statewide and regional components of this politics are the kinds of things that I thought you may tell us a bit more about. And certainly one of the significant aspects of this is for the public to know who are the stakeholders other than the public. So.
No, that's a good point. You know, as you go regionally with something like this, or you go statewide or nationally, whatever it may be, every particular region, every particular area has different issues and different problems. If it's droughts or if it's flooding or whatever it may be, global warming. So you have to kind of look at each one of those areas to say, okay, what are their issues, what are their problems, and how can they help in working towards a common goal?
Right. So the stakeholders come to this with different problems on their hands.
Right. Different problems, different issues, different things. We were talking earlier about Marin County and the soils here and mudslides and what have you. Well, you wouldn't have that if you were in Montana. But in this northern part of California, or all the way to the northern part of California, north coast is like this. So it becomes a regional thing. And we kind of did the same thing here in Marin Municipal. And each one of the cities was a little bit different. Each one of the little valleys was a little bit different in how they were handling it. Ross Valley, a lot of groundwater. People were drilling wells so they could keep their irrigation going and what have you. And they did. Whereas other folks in Tam Valley, a tremendous amount of fog comes through. A lot of people live underneath these eucalyptus trees. So they put visqueen down, water drops off the fog, drops on the leaves, drops on the ground, and they collect it in a cistern down here at the bottom. Stuff like this. So it becomes kind of a regional thing. So you expand that out. And I think that's true with anything that has to do with weather, has to do with droughts, El Niños, or whatever you might say. And how you handle each one of those problems. Now, how do you get that across to everybody? It starts with the leaders. They have to start understanding that they have to become come from the part. Top. And it's like what we did. It started with me. It started with my board. The governor in this last drought, got involved in the thing, which was important. Until that happened, everybody kind of said, "Oh yeah, right. I don't want to worry about it." Then when edict came down, you're going to save 25%. People got, said, "Hey, we've got to do something."
Right. So were you pleased then, in the end, from the response you had from the state government and the federal government? Or are there elements to it that you wish had been addressed at the time? Perhaps all those decisions could have happened quicker than they did.
I think it had a lot to do with how I was running around all over the place looking for water. The state understood from the governor on down what the issues were in Marin County. But were they going to do anything about it? Probably not. However, being good friends with Ron Roby, who was Director of Water Resources, I already had contacted David Kennedy down at Metropolitan Water District, who ran the water district, and says, "Hey, how about releasing and don't take 250,000 acre feet of water?" Just little conversations like that. That caused that meeting to occur with all the agencies and myself. And we created the document by which water was moved around. Before that, all the farmers were, where am I going to get water? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Kern County was screaming for more water for their irrigation and all the rest, crops. So,
and this is water, if I may interject again, that is coming primarily from, not from underground, from drilling, right, from wells and stuff, but it comes from rivers, from reservoirs, canals, and so on. Because, as you mentioned in your book, by the 1930s, there was such heavy drilling in the Central Valley aquifer that all that water was gone.
Just about. And as I said before, is the water originally was down maybe 250 feet to be able to tap into it, and now they're drilling down to 3,000 feet.
Right.
So it's being mined.
Right.
Being mined. Will it ever get replaced? No.
Right. Right.
Not unless you had 3 or 4 or 5 years of El Niños, and then everybody's house would be gone. So
right, and that takes us naturally to the next, I think, and final topic of our conversation. The certainty by researchers and government agencies and so on is very high that we are going to experience this year, this winter season, an incredibly strong El Nino in California. By some metrics, it's expected, this El Nino is expected to be the strongest on record. So a couple of questions here. One is, what do you see as kind of the statewide impacts of this upcoming El Nino? And the second is, going locally now, what should people in Marin County expect from it? And are there any suggestions you may have as to how to prepare for it?
Well, statewide, here again, it depends on where you are in the state. And,
so we're talking about the regional
this gets back
impacts.
to the regional issues. There will be a certain amount of flooding that's going to occur all over the state. You're going to get a lot of slides all over Southern California. It's a good example. All those houses that are built on those hilltops and slopes and what have you, talk about soils that move. Whoa, heavy duty. You know, a lot of them are like Malibu. They sit right over the ocean. There are going to be some of those may be in the ocean because of wave action, because of all kinds of other stuff. So it's kind of a different bag no matter where you are in the state. As far as locally is concerned,
given that Marin has so many hills and so on and so forth.
You have that part of it, but also they have the flooding issue. The whole Ross Valley, if this thing hits, they're going to be flooding. Sad part about it, this went on in '82, went on in '97, or whatever the dates were. It happened there again. They've been talking about a flood control project there for years, and they still haven't built anything. Novato, another watershed, whole different one here. We went through in '84 and created the first phase of a flood control program. So we're somewhat protected. Not completely, but somewhat. We'll get some localized flooding where the drainage gets plugged up, the storm drains get plugged up, that type of thing. But it's not going to be as severe as it had been in the past. Every 10 years, Novato would flood, the whole downtown would be underwater. So that probably won't happen, but you'll get some localized stuff. So it's different no matter where you go. And we talked about the hillsides and all that. Now, how do we prepare for it? I think people are more informed today about how they can protect themselves. That doesn't mean their house won't slide off the hill because they're not going to spend the $40,000 trying to put piers underneath it or do something like that. But where they're in the low areas, they could put sandbags around their houses and sandbags, so water doesn't come in the house. So all the cities have now locations where you could pick up the bags, you could get the sand, you could do all that stuff. Early warning systems. All kinds of early warning systems now are in effect. all
Are
over.
we talking
every one of the
about
cities.
floods or
Floods.
or
Floods.
mudslides?
Floods.
Floods.
The mudslides are kind of hit or miss anyway, and if somebody is living on a hillside, they should have a geotech or geotechnical engineer take a look at it, see what they think, so forth, so on. But
in terms
will
of
they do
flooding, early warning systems are here already.
oh yeah, yeah. And I remember in '82 driving through town, the downtown Novato, there was water all over the place. So in fact, there was water going up and down, or up Redwood Boulevard. But nobody was really thought about it. Okay, we have flood. Now, everybody's a little more in tune with these issues. It's like earthquakes.
Right.
People are more tuned now with earthquakes because of press, because of stuff that's out there. Do they listen? Good question. Hopefully they do.
Yeah.
Now, I think down the road, because of this, not only the El Nino thing, but global warming and all the rest of it. And this is, by the way, global warming isn't anything new. This has been going on periodically over the centuries, but we're just creating it faster. And I think as soon as we realize that, getting back to global warming, but getting back to water, that we can't grow lawns anymore. We can't, the practices that we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago should just like electric cars.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. One very final question, and that is, in your experience and estimation, has the state done enough to deal with this multi-year drought that we're experiencing? Even though people's anxieties are easing a bit because El Nino is coming, and of course there are consequences, but
well, I'm not privy, obviously, to what the state is doing as far as for future problems, as far as drought, dry periods. There's a lot of talk about various things going on and various public works projects. Again, I think they should be working with each one of the regions and saying, okay, what are you doing? As an example, the North Coast, Marin, Sonoma, Mendocino, Del Norte, Humboldt, so forth, so on, are working together to develop supply programs for the future, working together on conservation, working together on wastewater reclamation. So they're really kind of ahead of the curve, if you will. Central Valley, all they do is drill wells, drill holes in the ground. That requires a tremendous snowpack to alleviate that problem. It'll never get rid of it.
And to replenish the aquifer.
Replenish the aquifer. So we need snow for obvious reasons. But when the water the flows in the various rivers are running high or flooding, we should be making use of that water in some fashion by storing it somewhere. And there's places we could store it around the state. Now the state looking at this, hopefully they are. I don't know.
Therefore, you're saying, I think, between the lines, that this approach the state has taken with a 25%, I believe, reduction in water consumption has not taken into account the regional intricacies of water resources in California, and therefore may not have been, in the end, the best solution.
Well, I think you look at the politics of this. Where's most of the people live in the state of California? South of the Tehachapi's. Guess who has the power and the glory and whatever. So this is a reason why all the aqueducts and all that stuff was built. Which, okay, I have a crazy attitude about this. I think it's great. They get all the water they want. They can stay down there. They don't need to come north, where the water is. And that's always been the case. So I think it's a matter of one thing that's going to happen in the future, and I say it in there has to be a closer relationship between the water purveyors of the state of California, regardless of the state to the local folks, whatever.
Right.
And a relationship that works so that they trade water, they work who's got a little bit more water. In other words, be more efficient with it.
Right. We very much appreciated your time.
Thank you.
We hope that this is the first of a longer series of more interviews with you, and we're very grateful.
Well, I could go on for 3 more days if you'd like, but I don't think anybody will want to watch it that long.
Thank you. We'll
You're
pick it
welcome.
up in the
You're
future
welcome.
again.
Sure.
Thank you.